huge welcome to all of you for coming along to the launch of our new Centre for Digital Trust and Society. It's really exciting to be here. This is the culmination of quite a lot of work over a few years. We're going to start with a quick introduction from Colette to set the centre in context for the university. I'll then give an overview of the centre and what our work involves and what our plans are for the future, and most importantly, how you can get involved in the centre, because we're really keen for you to join us. And then we'll have a panel discussion. We've got 5 wonderful panelists to talk about some different perspectives on digital trust and security in a digital society, and some of the opportunities there are for academics and others to work together. So I'm really looking forward to today, but I think we'll start by handing over to Colette to welcome us. Colette.
Thank you. Welcome, everybody, and thank you for asking me to open this. I'm really pleased so many people could join today, both from across the university and many different organisations in Greater Manchester and nationally. The launch of this Centre for Digital Trust and Society is a really important milestone for the university and its flagship Digital Futures platform. As some of you know, Digital Futures was launched in 2018 and brings together a multidisciplinary community of over 1,000 researchers at the university and stakeholders from across government, industry and civil society, all to work on some of the most exciting and important areas of our digital world. Digital trust and security is a central part of this agenda and has been from the outset. And over the last 3 years, I've been really pleased to watch how this research activity has gathered pace through the leadership of Emma and others in the centre. We've got researchers involved across all 3 faculties and from a full range of disciplines. And it's very exciting to see social scientists working with computer scientists and engineers, data scientists working with arts researchers, health informatics and psychology. There's also been significant investment in the centre to get it up and running. The university's invested in several new posts, and we're already seeing the fruits of the success, and that the researchers have secured more than 12 million in grant funding for new research. And this is really sizable for research activity, which is led out of the Faculty of Humanities. This investment, and colleagues are going to tell you more in the rest of the sessions, has enabled us to build a really impressive research portfolio, exploring multiple aspects of digital trust, from data privacy to hardware and software security, cybercrime to workplace security, and trust in digital democracy. We've established really strong and productive partnerships with organisations from across the region and nationally, and I can't name them all, they're on the emerging website, but this includes GCHQ, the Art Group, Barclays, Greater Manchester Police, National Cyber Security Centre, and of course Manchester City Council and Greater Manchester Combined Authority, who are many of our anchor partners and are with us here today. Cybersecurity and trust in data is at the heart of the digital revolution, and the Centre could not be more timely, both in terms of its agenda, but also its physical presence in a non-digital world. The Centre is important because it sits nearby and part of Greater Manchester, which has an ambitious strategy to become a world-leading digital city region, recognised globally for digital innovation. And I know Phil Swan will be saying more about this in the next session. Part of this is about developing a digital security ecosystem. And this is happening rapidly across Greater Manchester. It's attracting national and international investment, and it's offering enormous opportunities for partnerships between academics, industry, government and civil society. And I'm pleased to see the university is already playing a prominent role in this ecosystem. Emma and her colleagues are leading Sprite Plus, the UKRI National Network Plus for security, privacy, identity and trust. We partner with MMU, Salford and Lancaster in the Greater Manchester Cyber Foundry, working with SMEs. And another example is partnership with Barclays Eagles Labs in the brand new Manchester Digital Innovation and Security Hub. So lots of really exciting and important things going on. We believe that the centre is the first digital trust and security focused university centre in the UK to be led from humanities and incorporating disciplinary expertise from across the full stretch of disciplines. The centre sits with our commitment to social responsible innovation and digital inclusion at the university and to building a safe and secure digital city region for all. Our agenda at the university resonates very strongly with that of Greater Manchester's combined authority. We have an international reputation for this commitment, and so our work will stretch, I hope, internationally as well as regionally and nationally, and I have every confidence in the team that they will deliver on this ambition. And right at the heart of the centre is the mention of society, the Centre for Digital Trust and Society, which captures the importance of the social dimensions of digital systems. This is a really important and exciting research agenda, and I encourage all researchers and everyone here from all career stages and disciplines to spread the word and to get involved in the work of the centre. And I look forward to seeing the development and activity of the centre as it carries its work forward. I'm now going to hand over to Emma to talk more about the centre. Thank you very much for listening to me, and good luck, everybody.
Thanks so much, Colette, and thank you for such a nice warm welcome. I'm going to share my screen so we can have a look at some slides, and I'll run through some of the things that the centre will be doing and is doing. If you have any questions, do feel free to put them in the chat, and we'll pick them up at the end. So let me start with a screen share. Okay, so I'm assuming that Lauren or Justina will tell me if I've got that wrong. So as Colette said, this is the culmination of several years of work. Much of it started before I arrived in March 2018. And as Colette also said, this is part of the Digital Futures platform and portfolio. And you can see us there. Hopefully, there you go, as one of the cross-cutting themes in this portfolio. And there's two things that are important here. First of all, that it is a cross-cutting theme because digital trust and security is really central to all of these sectoral challenges across the top of that digital futures matrix there. So whether that's trusted digital healthcare or secure smart cities, or the security and trust challenges posed in the digital transformation of workplaces, of manufacturing, of the creative industry, or the way that government and democratic institutions function. Trust and security is at the heart of that. The other thing I want to highlight here is that the theme is called digital trust and security, not cyber security. And this was a decision made before I got to the university, but I think it was a really important and forward-thinking decision, because cyber security is really important, and it's a really important part of our programme, but it conjures up a particular way of thinking about security and digital systems. And to our mind, the issues raised in digital transformation go much further than just cyber security to incorporate questions of trust as well. So when we started out on this journey more than 3 years ago, one of our first tasks was to talk to stakeholders from within the university and talk to researchers within the university, but also go beyond and talk to businesses, to local, regional and national government, to civil society groups, to other academics and to the police and so on. And what we quickly found was that most of the most pressing challenges in digital trust and security have a really strong STEM and social behavioural science angle to them. So we're talking to organisations who of course want robust technical security measures to protect their infrastructure and data, but they were also facing challenges on how to implement cybersecurity, good cybersecurity practice throughout their organization. So how do you make security something that ordinary people can use rather than just rather technically skilled people? They also raised a whole load of issues around risk and resilience. So most organizations know that they're going to be attacked by criminal hackers or come under some other kind of cyber attack. And most of them know that, you know, a lot of those attacks are going to be successful. So how do they make decisions about risk and prioritizing their security resources? How do they ensure that they're resilient and can recover quickly when they have been the subject of attack with minimum damage to themselves and their customers and their clients and stakeholders? And there's a whole range of issues around privacy and data protection that came up again and again in our discussions with people outside the university. So concerns about how data was protected, but also concerns about how data could be used, and that trade-off between being able to use data and artificial intelligence, machine learning applications for the enormous advances and insights that they can generate, whilst at the same time retaining the trust of people whose data that is, that data is being used and protected competently. Linked to that is a whole range of issues around responsible digital innovation and making sure that digital systems are trustworthy because they are designed, implemented and operated for social good and not used to manipulate or deceive other people. And linked to that, concerns around the way in which digital systems can be used to undermine public trust in democratic institutions, in institutions like our healthcare system or our media, and also how digital systems can be used to promote extremism and undermine community cohesion through, for instance, the spreading of conspiracy theories and disinformation. And running through many of these conversations were also a concern about cyber criminals, so individuals using digital systems for criminal activities, whether that's kind of fraud or other illicit activities online or spreading hate speech or so on. And a particular concern there about victims as well, and thinking about the consequences for victims of cybercrime. So that's not just in terms of the financial loss, which can be considerable, but also thinking about the psychological and emotional damage that can be caused through cybercriminal activities. So this centre grew out of those conversations across the university, and there you go. And we also talked to people whose research was relevant to digital trust and society. We found around 170 researchers expressing an interest in this area, either because they were already working in it or they were interested in working in it. And following that up, we found several clusters of researchers who were active in this area and also enthusiastic about taking it forward with us. So we pitched the idea of creating a centre to the university management last year, and happily they said yes. We'd love to have launched this with an in-person event and a reception and guest speakers, and we will probably do that. Well, we will have an in-person event later in the year when we can do. Our idea for pitching the centre was that, you know, although the digital trust and security theme was growing nicely, we needed somewhere as to anchor it, and the centre gives this to us. So the idea is to create a centre which will develop research excellence in trust and security in digital societies. As Colette said, we think our contribution here is distinctive because very few university centres for digital trust are anchored in humanities or social sciences, and most that are involved in cybersecurity, in fact I think all of them involved in cybersecurity, are led from computer science or engineering departments. So in our scope and in our leadership we're distinctive in the UK. I've talked already about the importance of bringing technical and social and behavioural science perspectives together, so the interdisciplinary aspects of our research are also really important, and the centre allows us to bring researchers from different disciplines together to develop innovative solutions and innovative research. We've spent a lot of time over the last few years developing good relationships with stakeholders from industry, government, police, civil society, and of course academics across the UK and beyond. And the centre allows us to develop those relationships even further. And as I think we'll talk about in some of the panel discussions later, this is a fast-growing area for the UK and internationally. It's seen as a very important area, and the COVID pandemic and the efforts to build back better are only accelerating that effort. And there are a lot of funding and impact opportunities right now and anticipated in the future, and having a centre allows us to anticipate those and to be in a good position to exploit them when they come up. And the final point for the centre is also to start thinking about teaching and learning. So we have a couple of flagship courses already. We have a USL course, an interdisciplinary course for undergraduates in trust and security in the digital age, and that's available in 10 and 20 credit versions for undergraduates from any discipline. And there's also the Advanced Computer Science Master's degree with a cybersecurity pathway that has been developed as well within computer science. But there are plenty of other opportunities as well to develop undergraduate and postgraduate teaching, and also take advantage of opportunities for developing continuous professional development courses and executive education opportunities. So it's a really exciting time to be in this space. I said earlier that we'd found clusters of researchers who were already doing some fantastic work and were keen to develop it further. And these 6 clusters form the basis of the centre at the moment. I'll run through them very quickly. There are events later on in this week and early next week where we're going to talk more about each cluster. So if you're interested in a particular cluster, you can go along to those events, or you could contact the cluster leads directly and have a chat with them. And also some of them will be around at the end of this event today in breakout rooms if you wanted to have an informal chat with them there. First cluster is Digital Technologies and Crime, and this is led by Professor Nick Lord out of Criminology. And the focus of this cluster is on analysing and understanding criminal activity and misconduct that occurs in online spaces or is facilitated through in other ways by digital technologies. And some of the work they're doing are looking at victims and vulnerability to online fraud, and in particular a project that's just started looking at the role of the way that criminals are now exploiting the COVID situation in online frauds. Also looking at serious and organised crimes such as money laundering and illicit financial flows. Some work on online child sexual exploitation, and also work on drugs vending in encrypted marketplaces, in crypto markets, in which some people called it the dark net. The second cluster here is privacy and trust, and this is led by Professor Mark Elliott in social statistics. And their work is looking at new approaches for ensuring confidentiality of data, and they are particularly interested in interdisciplinary approaches that bring together statistics and computer science and legal analysis and social science to develop solutions for ensuring confidentiality of data. One of their central topics is around anonymisation and some related topics of statistical disclosure control and data environment analysis, but they're interested in a whole range of privacy enhancing and privacy protecting techniques within that cluster. Third cluster here is Trusted Digital Systems, which is led by Dr. Lucas Cordero from Computer Science, and this is a large and growing cluster of researchers focused on methods, tools, policies and practices for ensuring trustworthy software and hardware systems. So at the centre of that is work on cryptography, automated testing, software and hardware verification, autonomous decision making, and design, analysis and monitoring of trustworthiness. The fourth cluster here is around workplace and organisational security, and that's led from the business school by Dr. Richard Armendinger. And this again is a highly interdisciplinary cluster. Cluster members come from areas as diverse as data science, financial technology, innovation, psychology and strategic management. And they are focused on insights that can help promote cybersecure attitudes and behaviour in the workplace. They're interested in the relationship between organisational and workplace security and productivity, tying into our new Productivity Institute. And they're also focused on risk and behaviour and how to understand risk and promote positive behaviours. The fifth cluster there is democracy and trust. That's led by Professor Rachel Gibson in politics. And as the title suggests, they're focused on trust and security in democratic systems. So they're interested in citizen trust in democracy and how the shift to digitised world and the same with digital campaigning may influence citizen trust. So this includes some of those consequences of that shift to a data-driven campaigning by political parties. It includes understanding the impact of the spread of disinformation and conspiracy theories that may undermine trust in democratic institutions and contribute to polarisation. And it also includes security and integrity of the electoral structures. And finally, the advanced mathematics capability here is a really important underpinning capability for all of the clusters and all of our work in this area. And is also a focus for new developments in theory that advance our understanding of topics like differential privacy, encryption, data augmentation, and so on. So there's a lot going on in each of those clusters, and as you've probably noticed as I've talked about them, there is also some overlap between some of them. So there are spaces where two or more clusters work together on particular projects to enhance that interdisciplinary approach. So one example is the use of synthetic data as a privacy protecting technique, where researchers in the privacy and trust cluster and the crime cluster and the advanced mathematics cluster all have an interest in synthetic data, which we're now bringing together to develop new insights. Another example would be thinking about how criminals exploit developments in financial technologies in fintech for criminal purposes, which involves researchers from the digital technologies and crime cluster working with the workplace and organisational security cluster. So there's research going on between clusters. We also work with other digital futures themes. So for instance, with members of the health and care theme on data privacy, and with the business and employment theme on some areas of workplace security. We also have collaborations that span all of the clusters and draw in regional and national partners, and Colette mentioned these briefly a moment ago. So one is the Cyber Foundry, which is a 4-university partnership led by MMU with Manchester, Lancaster and Salford on board and funded by the European Union. The University of Manchester lead for this is Danny Drezner in computer science. And the purpose of the Cyber Foundry is to support small and medium enterprises with cybersecurity. And it's helped us build a stronger relationship with GMCA and with Greater Manchester Police and their Cyber Resilience Centre. And it also helps us understand better some of the challenges faced by small businesses in implementing good cybersecurity measures. Colette also mentioned Sprite Plus, so this is led from the University of Manchester. It's an EPSRC funded network plus that's really a vehicle for collaboration, although we also have money to fund research as well. We've got over 550 members so far, a large proportion of those from are academics from across the UK and beyond. But also a growing number of businesses who have joined us. And along the bottom, you can see a very diverse range of project partners within Sprite. So if you want to know a bit more about that, there's a website, spritehub.org, where you can join and learn a bit more about what we're doing. And then finally, on the big ticket collaborations, a very recent announcement that we're part of. We're the Barclays Eagle Labs led consortium, which has been appointed to set up the Manchester Digital Innovation and Security Hub. And this is a physical location in the centre of Manchester where innovators and small businesses can come together to come up with new solutions and new ideas for cybersecurity. And again, that's starting up in a few months and is a really exciting venture to be involved in. So I hope in that very rapid skim through what we're doing and what's involved in the centre that some of you will be interested in getting involved. So do come along to the seminar series that we run, and we will have workshops as well going forward. And if you think that your research is relevant to digital trust and security, or you'd like to make it relevant to that, then do consider affiliating to the centre. And we'll be showcasing the research of our affiliates to our external network of stakeholders. Affiliates will also have the chance to build collaborations within the university and also beyond through our network. And this should help us exploit some of those new funding opportunities that are coming up. And we're particularly keen to have early career researchers join us. And we do have an early career researcher strategy, which is led by Dr. David Bilgil from criminology. And we're looking at ways that we can support you get your careers off the ground in digital trust and security. And you can learn about all of these things through signing up to the Digital Trust and Security newsletter. And I think Justina will be putting links in the chat if you don't already have them for those. And just finally, I'll highlight, we do have a small amount of money. It's not a huge amount, but it's enough to run a seed corn funding competition. So if you've got an idea that you'd like to develop that's relevant to digital trust and society, you might want to think about applying for a small amount of funding to pump prime that idea. So we're interested in scoping reviews and pilot studies or workshops or symposia or other activities that help you develop collaborative relationships and take your research further in this way. The total budget is only 40k, but that allows us to give up to 8 projects, up to about 5k each to develop some research next year. We'll be opening that call for proposals in a couple of weeks. It'll be a very light touch application process. There won't be lots and lots of forms to fill in. Deadline will be a month later, and the projects will start in the new academic year. And if you sign up for our newsletter, you'll know more as the details come out. So do have a look at our website. There's a lot more on there. If you've got any questions, you can email the centre directly on dtscentre@manchester.ac.uk, or you can get in touch with me directly or the cluster leads if you have a question for them. I will stop sharing there, and hopefully that's gone. But if there are any questions in the chat or elsewhere, I'll be happy to take them. Just having a skim through the chat, looks like apart from link issues, we don't have any specific questions. Okay, in that case, let's move on to the panel session. And this is really exciting. I mentioned several times how important our partners outside the university are, and we have 3 of them here with us today, as well as 2 of our colleagues from inside the university. So we have Phil Swan from Greater Manchester Combined Authority, and Phil, for those of you who don't know him, is Chief Information Officer and Digital Lead for Greater Manchester Combined Authority. He works with private and public sector partners across the city region to drive economic growth and social impact, and he has the complex but really exciting task of working with all the Greater Manchester localities and the Health and Social Care Partnership to deliver the very ambitious Greater Manchester digital strategy. So it's really fantastic that you could take time to be here, Phil. We've also got Julie Dawson, who is Director of Regulatory and Policy at Yoti, which is a company that promotes digital identity systems. Yoti is one of our project partners on Sprite Plus, and it's an interesting company because their focus is digital identity for good. Julie's an authority in digital identity policy, ethics and governance, and she's responsible for leading regulatory and government relations for Yoti, and also supports the Yoti ethics boards, internal and external ethics boards. We're also pleased to welcome Alex von Summerin here. His background is as a serial entrepreneur, is how he describes himself, in IT software and hardware, and he's now a general partner in Amadeus Capital Partners, which is a global venture capital firm. He's an early stage technology investor. Also really delighted that he's recently taken up an honorary chair at the University of Manchester. So he's honorary professor in computer science, and he's helping us develop that cybersecurity teaching here at the University of Manchester, as well as supporting innovation and business activities here. From the university, we have Dr. Ange Davis from the Faculty of Biology, Medicine and Health. Her research expertise is in clinical bioinformatics and genomic medicine, and she's also Director of Digital Transformation in Healthcare Education, where her role involves ensuring that current and future healthcare professionals are equipped to deal with digital transformation in their workplace. And finally, last but not least, we have Daniel Drezner, who's Professor of Cybersecurity in Department of Computer Science in FSE, who is also the University of Manchester Academic Lead for Cybersecurity and our lead for teaching in digital trust and security. He's been an integral part of the digital security theme from the outset. Long before anyone else was championing digital security, Danny was championing it here in the university. And he's also a champion of diversity and inclusion in cybersecurity skills, and director and co-founder of an organisation called IASME that helps businesses improve cybersecurity, risk management and good governance. So all of you are extremely welcome. I'm delighted that you could join us. I'm going to ask you each to say a few words about your role and where you see some of the relevance of digital trust in social contexts. And then I've got a couple of questions, but also if you've got questions from the audience, please put them in the meeting chat and we'll pick them up in a bit. But Phil, perhaps we can start with you and your huge portfolio working with GM Digital. And I know it's going to be hard to sum up in less than 5 minutes, but go on.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Emma, and thanks so much, Colette, as well for the introduction there. And I mean, it is a phenomenally exciting time for this whole agenda in Greater Manchester. It's been building, as many of you will know, really over the last 5 or 6 years now, as we've sort of set ourselves the ambition to be you know, the beating heart of digital security in the UK, or as Lord Peter Mandelson referred to it when he and Andy Burnham launched the Cyber Foundry not that long ago, the UK's Cyberopolis, which is, I think you ought to have a little TM at the end, but we haven't quite much done that yet. It is a phenomenally exciting agenda for Greater Manchester, but also for the UK. And the UK is a global leader in this space. You know, we lead the way in so many aspects of digital security globally, and it is more important than ever. I mean, from a Greater Manchester perspective, I mean, we help drive that economy. We have a £5 billion digital economy in the city region, but it's not just about the economic growth. It's about our aspirations here, our social aspirations as well, for social innovation impact. And if you look at things like the GM Care record for our 2.8 million residents, the Clean Air Zone proposals, the early years innovation, school readiness, trust and digital trust underpins all of these significant programs. And you know, we'll perhaps come back to it in the conversation, in the panel conversation. But you know, we had an election last week, probably one of the most paper-based, large-scale processes in the UK. That's not going to change anytime soon, or is it? You know, we're going to, we need to think about some of these things, and the timing for this centre really couldn't be better. Emma and Colette talked about some of the fantastic initiatives that this complements in Greater Manchester. One of the things that stood out recently, of course, was the government's recent integrated defence review announcements, which stated that the UK Cyber Force is going to be based in the northwest, the cyber corridor that was referred to. And this is incredibly timely. The global response that's required around this agenda is enormous, both from an organised crime and a state actor perspective. And the UK is responding at scale, and it's fantastic to see the centre coming on stream. You know, the clusters that Emma's talked through are incredibly appropriate and timely and relevant, and will be a huge asset for both, I think, Greater Manchester and the UK as a whole. So delighted to be taking part in this launch. Really exciting time. Brings real strength, depth, rigour, innovation, and capability to a growing ecosystem, which I think personally is wonderful and will take us on to new levels and new strengths at an incredibly important time for both Greater Manchester and the UK. So thank you.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much, Bill. Julie, your business works on digital identity, and you have a really interesting strapline, which is digital identity for good. Would you be able to tell us a little bit about Yoti? And I think you need to be unmuted, Justina, if you don't mind. Unmuting. There you go. And oh.
Hi, thank you so much, Emma. I'm really honoured to be here today, and really delighted in particular to learn more about the wider interdisciplinary grouping of people that we have and the wide breadth of skills there. My role at Yoti is quite unusual, so it spans government relations, looks at the different accreditations around cybersecurity and data responsibility that we think are needed for a digital identity company, and also building an ethical framework in terms of digital identity. That is actually quite new. So over 1 billion people in the world don't have any way of proving who they are or how old they are. And you might not know that in the UK, 24% of adults don't have any photo ID. And that can prove really challenging for people who maybe are looking for work, looking to move house or rent, looking to interact with public services. And we're hearing in the moment a lot in the news about potential future requirements around voting, which has obviously major ethical implications. And everybody is looking at how travel might unfold with COVID and how you might have to potentially bind a test or another result in future if you're looking to do any international travel. So we're a global identity company looking at verification and biometric technologies. And we're looking essentially at how an individual can prove who they are to another individual, to a government, to a non-profit, and doing that in a variety of ways. But I think what was quite different, and it echoes a lot of the topics that are being discussed across these research areas, was how to do that so that the individual was in charge, that the individual can share less rather than more, looking at it from the perspective of someone that at times wants to be very private, at times needs anonymity, how their data is kept secure, what is the transparency of the business model, the accountability, and then crucially the accessibility, be that around people without devices, might have something burning, the challenges of remote working. And all of those are very different challenges in terms of how do you look at disabilities, people without devices, looking at diversity and people maybe without documents. All of those offer a lot of challenges on the fraud landscape, but also on the accessibility landscape. And we thought we really needed to build in scrutiny from the outset. So one of my areas of my role is looking at an external ethics board with people from the human rights side, consumer rights, online harms, accessibility and sustainability, and also internally within the company. Enabling people from every different team to take part in an internal trust and ethics group that mirrors the external one and thinks about thorny issues such as democracy and looking at the elements of be it voting, online voting, elected representatives, and I'm sure soon we'll be discussing this element internally a lot with regards to the ID card element for voting in the UK. So we really look forward to interacting with quite a few of the different teams that are going to be emerging in this area, because we think more scrutiny is required, more debate is required, and that cross-functionality will be really supportive. We do take part in quite a few different sandboxes and other ESPRC projects, and we're looking at how we can collaborate on a whole range of different reg tech areas. And for that reason, we're delighted to be here today and really excited to be a project partner. Thank you so much.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Julie. I mean, there's loads of things that you brought up there, and Phil did as well, around the kind of policy implications for all this digital development, and also issues of inclusion, which I think we'll come back to shortly. But first, Alex, you come at this from a kind of industry perspective and from an entrepreneurial perspective. So tell us a little bit about your thoughts on digital trust in the social context.
Well, first of all, thanks very much for inviting me, and it's a great pleasure to be involved in such an important initiative, and I'm really happy to be here to see it launched. I'm looking forward to joining in some of the other sessions over the coming days. The function of venture capital investors is to try to support people in making their ideas active as businesses. But it turns out that not enough venture capital investors really understand the complexities around the exploitation of technology in society. And I think a lot of people, not just investors, tend to focus a lot on the sort of technological aspects of the solutions without actually thinking enough about the people aspects of those solutions. So we've heard several other of my colleagues here talking about some important examples of that, such as ethical issues and societal inclusion issues. And I think you really do need initiatives like this one to help improve the level of education and understanding within the wider community about the criticality of the people side of things. Those of us who work in areas like security really appreciate very intimately the significance of people. It's usually the people, frankly, that do the wrong things, you know, that either have the wrong motivations or click on the wrong links, or, you know, ultimately are hit by the bad outcomes. And so, you know, the sort of indistinguishability of people and technology is something important to emphasize. But we hear a lot, frankly, from the government at the moment about the importance of STEM education, and perhaps not quite enough about the importance of social education in areas of technology. And so that's why I think it's really, really important to amplify the complexity of the challenge and to try to pick out some of the, you know, really critical details that are about people in these systems. I was fortunate to be an entrepreneur for many years and to build products. And the thing I learned about building products is that your product is useless unless it takes into account what the user really, really wants. And, you know, frankly, engineers aren't always as smart as they should be about thinking about the needs of end users. They have a bit of a tendency to pursue the solution for the solution's sake, or to exploit their invention because they've invented it, not because it actually solves a problem that real people have. So one of the questions that investors frequently ask is whether or not something is a solution which is looking for a problem. In other words, that, you know, it sort of provides a solution in a vacuum. And I think that by helping to expand people's understanding of the societal impact of technologies, we can actually make inventions much more likely to be useful to people in the real world. We can make them more investable by venture capital investors like myself, and we can actually therefore make them able to have greater impact, to serve more people with value, and to give benefit to society more widely. And those have got to be not only good societal outcomes, they're actually common sense from a business point of view as well. So actually that's a genuine win-win situation. So I really commend you, Emma, for leading this initiative. It's great to see so many people participating and paying attention to it. I'm looking forward to spending more time being involved in the programme. And thanks again for having me joining today.
Great, thank you very much, Alex. Again, some really interesting issues there about building productive partnerships between social scientists and computer scientists and engineers, and kind of to speak the same language, but also for a common good at the end of it. I want to turn to some of our internal partners here. So Ange from FBMH, it's really great to have you here. Maybe you could say a little bit about healthcare and data trust and privacy from your perspective.
Yeah, thanks, Emma. No, really delighted to join this launch today. And actually, as many people have said, I think the timing couldn't be more critical for what we're talking about. If we open a news app at the moment, health data can't be escaped at the moment, can it? You know, each time we look at the BBC News, we see regular updates relating to the population's health through the reporting of obviously the daily COVID stats. At the personal level, we can manage our own appointments, we can look at our prescriptions through the NHS app, and if we're lucky enough and our GPs have got the right systems and give us access, we might be able to look at our own health records. So people might be aware there's been various failed attempts through initiatives such as care.data over the last few years, which actually stalled the sharing of health data for quite some time at a national level. But we've really made progress over the last 18 months or so. And in fact, we've actually now moved to something called the National Data Opt-out. And this is really important in terms of healthcare and the kinds of work we're doing in the Digital Futures Health and Care domain. And what this means actually is that your data will be shared by your GP with NHS Digital as the sort of national data guardian for the purposes of research and service planning, unless you opt out. Now, that's quite interesting from a societal point of view, because I feel that really there's been very limited public awareness of this new model, or education via our GPs, for example, and much more could be done in groups such as this, such as the work that's been undertaken by a group led by the Wellcome called Understanding Patient Data, which explores the risks and benefits of data sharing. And if we think about it from a security, if you think about it from a security perspective, if you think about it, this puts NHS Digital in an extreme position of great power, but also vulnerability to data hacks. Obviously, requests to access that data that's held in NHS Digital are very carefully monitored by them, but access can be granted to NHS, local authorities, private sector, for example, and generally, unless absolutely necessary, that data is obviously all personal identifiable information. It is removed. But is there an alternative? Some of the work that we've been doing, particularly in my area of research, is that data sharing doesn't have to be all or nothing. So there's a model known as dynamic consent, and actually we've been working on something around the implementation of blockchain and smart contracts, and that actually enables the sharing of, we've found a sharing of genetic data, where we can actually give the patient back control of what they share and with whom, which is quite an interesting sort of societal angle to examine. And obviously, if we look, there's more and more in the press all the time about how we might use AI to support clinical decision making. And this is a real interest where we're particularly growing our areas of research and many collaborations with the Christie Hospital, Manchester Foundation Trust, for example. You might well be aware, many of you, of initiatives such as the Greater Manchester Care Record, which have really been propelled by the pandemic. I'm sure others might say a word or two about this, such as Phil, for example. And this has been a huge and coordinated effort across the Greater Manchester region, and we can now have a fully integrated record, care record for 2.8 million citizens in the Greater Manchester region. And access to that amount of data from one locality is extremely powerful, and we can begin to use approaches such as artificial intelligence on these data sets to support clinical decision making and help us to inform both research but also how we plan services. But in all of this, if we're going to use AI in clinical decision making, there needs to be much more transparency and trust, both from patients' perspective and healthcare professionals. Interestingly, we're hearing more and more so, and much more dialogue with developers of such algorithms. So the potential to improve patient outcomes really needs to be balanced against issues around data privacy, data security, and importantly, patient consent and how they want their data to be used. So that brings in the societal theme along with the trust. So these issues really need to be addressed, and we need to think at them from a very interdisciplinary research perspective, which I hope we can draw in through the centre. So importantly, just to leave you with a few sort of quandaries, sharing health data has a lot of potential, but it can bring risks, and we need to think about those, and we need to think about the balance between sharing versus the potential risk of sharing, and decide where that balance needs to sit, and who makes these decisions. So yeah, lots to be done, I think. Thanks.
Fantastic, really exciting time and challenging time for health data, and again those themes of social responsibility and the people who generate the data having control over it, really central in this. Danny, you've been involved in this theme. Well, you've been involved in cybersecurity your whole career, and in particular developing it here at Manchester. What's your perspective on some of these issues?
Well, I think the key thing I think was stated much earlier, in as much as we haven't embedded what we do at Manchester in the School of Computer Science. In fact, many of my colleagues in the School of Computer Science are constantly allied and partnered with other schools and departments. So we're very keen to kind of take a systemic view, and building also on what Alex was saying is that we like the applied over the abstract. So we're looking for things which at some stages will actually tackle some of the kind of the fundamental technology challenges which have come about because people haven't, for example, tested things well. So we have world class verification tools which have been created with a wide view of their application, rather than just a kind of a very narrow view of looking for particular cybersecurity vulnerabilities, and our research informs our teaching, which means that we're able to get involved in things like we've already mentioned the Cyber Foundry, the new digital security innovation hub, but we're also able to through our teaching embed a fifth column of people who might not necessarily go into cybersecurity, but because they've been interested in computer science, are likely to have some touch on technology, either directly or through whatever careers they may go into, and therefore, as a result of which, make the right kind of decisions. And we'd like to try and make sure that they kind of get that kind of applied view. So, for example, our teaching in computer science, which is growing because Robert Stevens and Lucas have been growing the team recently. We already have, for example, about a dozen industry partners who have been coming in now since 2004 to talk about how they actually apply these issues kind of in the workplace, in societal situations. I mean, yeah, we still touch on the traditional things that you'd expect to. So there's mathematical looks at cryptography and the like, but also we look at the systemic view, at the governance of how the people meet the technology and how one has to compensate for the others as well. And it's not just a matter of assuring the original technology and educating how to put in the kind of the protective measures when you build and implement and run and operate and sometimes decommission systems, and remembering all of those things. It's also recognizing that people really ought to have some sort of emotional inoculation of how to cope with the problems when they actually arise, and how to deal with things. And we look at this throughout our teaching in the school, and also teaching outside with schools. We have a community exercise called Save the World Wide Web, which we run last year's now, was run, for example, with BAE Systems and GCHQ, and that's now going into schools to teach people how to be safe online, remove as much as we can the dangers, and promote a kind of a community collaboration. And even within our own teaching, we try to simulate the situations that people are going to have to meet. So we throw people from different backgrounds. We try and kind of generate that kind of diverse collaboration with a sort of an underlying motto of diversity and adversity, and to try and teach people that they're not going to get a perfect situation, but they're going to have to cope with something, and it's how they manage it and take it forward, and perhaps incrementally and consistently evolve a safer situation, recognizing that there's going to be old stuff embedded in there that it's going to be very difficult to get rid of. But over time, that fifth column will be making that decisions to constantly make things better and take us out of this kind of period of inevitable risk.
Thanks, Danny. That's great. Again, issues of responsibility coming up there. So I don't see any questions yet in the chat, but I do encourage people to put their questions in there for the panel. But I might just pick up on the social responsibility issue with you, Phil, if that's okay, because one of the things that you and your colleagues are doing is having a particular focus on responsible digital innovation and digital inclusion. And I wonder if you might say a few words about how you're making that live in practice rather than just sort of words.
Yeah, absolutely. No, thanks, Emma. I think that point around, yes, responsible digital innovation and inclusion is huge. We did a piece of work a couple of years ago now, 1,000 face-to-face interviews across Greater Manchester, about 100 per borough, with a number of working groups around that, looking at attitudes to data sharing and how people felt about data sharing in Greater Manchester, to inform a number of initiatives and give us a platform for better policies and thinking across the city region. And I think there were some really headline pieces in that, like transparency is just critical. What is being shared about me? How do I control some of that? And Angela made some points around that earlier as well. I am comfortable for these things to be shared with, but I want to know what is going on. And how do we enable that at scale when actually we don't necessarily have the standards for some of that? Identity is a huge challenge. Identity is probably one of the biggest challenges we have from a digital perspective, from a public sector perspective in the UK. I'm loosely involved with some of the work from a government perspective around identity, and it is a huge problem. And in fact, in some ways, it's almost a luxury that we don't have one, which is perhaps slightly controversial. So if you're somewhere like Estonia, they couldn't afford not to do digital government, because the savings they make from digital government enables them to pay for their defence budget to meet the NATO requirement of 2% of GDP. So we in some ways, we don't have some of these things in place, but it costs us not having these things in place. But in terms of how we're working at a GM level, absolutely, we've been working very closely with Open Data Manchester on the declaration, and we're signatories to that declaration around innovative practice and AI and data. We're working with colleagues from across the city region. We have a very proactive data protection officer and data protection function, information governance in the combined authority. And the way we work across the city region through our information board and information strategy and so on is and we're not there yet. Let's be clear, we've got some way to go, but we have an ambition to be as transparent as we can be. And actually, with funnily enough, with the new mayoral election, Andy Burnham confirmed from there for the next 3 years, this is going to be something we're really going to be focusing on more and more, because it is absolutely critical. And there are some, we have some really significant programs coming through as a city region. The GM Care record, as Angela talked about, being one. Actually, how do people feel they can control their data and feel that they own their data? And trust is so fundamental to that. It is the currency which underpins all this activity. So the only way that will happen is by engaging with people, working with people, and being very open. Otherwise, we will erode trust and we won't be able to deliver the things we need to deliver as a city region.
It's so interesting. I'm kind of reminded of some of the work that FBMH led around citizens' juries, thinking about data privacy, and I mean what that showed to me was that actually when people have sufficient knowledge about some of the technologies and how they're used and what the benefits and challenges are, they can make some very sophisticated judgments about what they think is right. And it's a shame that that's still quite a small scale activity, because doing thousands of interviews and panel discussions is a major effort. That's
one of the challenges, undoubtedly. How do you engage with 2.8 million people represented in a representative manner? For the different groups across the city region, and how do you do that effectively? And that's perhaps something we could be picking up and working on as a specific opportunity.
Well, there may be people in the audience who have some really good ideas of how to tackle that challenge. I mean, Julie, some of this relates to digital identity, and you gave us some really interesting statistics earlier about people who are excluded from digital identity systems. But I mean, how do you see things, given what Phil has talked about there in terms of what Greater Manchester is trying to do?
I was really impressed by the breadth of different areas that he's looking at. And one of the things that made me think of, and I put a link in the chat, is something like the Edelman Trust Barometer, and what are the different non-financial indices that organisations can look at to help showcase what they're doing, but that just cannot be whitewashed. Looking at this whole area, there are great risks around both the surveillance angles and personalisation, and there's many different services we all use where it's actually quite hard to get under the covers and understand what is the business model of this organisation, and also for organisations to look at what could they be doing more to really include all of society to access those services. And I think it's imperative on technology companies to be more open as to the challenges that they're facing, People have always shied away from washing dirty laundry. But at times, if you are navigating a tricky area, such as what are the fraud vectors versus accessibility vectors, maybe that's something between tech companies that shouldn't be a specific competitive angle, but actually something where you have to collaborate more. So I think there's some really interesting areas where, hence the cross-faculty, the diverse approach of different departments can really work together to look across borders at what are the angles that can help make this work for citizens as well as for governments and organisations. And I hope that we're bringing that individual human element to play and thinking of that alongside the technology.
No, really, really interesting. Alex and Danny, do you want to come back on any of that or add to that?
Well, perhaps not necessarily come back, but I think it's very significant. I mean, this is again, I suppose, blowing our own trumpet as to what we do on the governance course. That when the students are starting to kind of look at the situation, we tell them, not only should they be looking at the use cases, but they also should be looking at the misuse cases as well. And and that forms their real view of the system, rather than just getting the kind of the roses and chocolate idea of what their objectives are. And the challenge, I suppose, with cybersecurity, we've often we often use this analogy, information. We used to talk about the information superhighway of road safety and the like. But the difference with cybersecurity is that you can do all those protective measures looking both ways to cross the road. The difference being with cybersecurity is that there are other drivers who are going to deliberately swerve to try and hit you.
Quite. Thank you. I'm not seeing Alex or Angela wanting to jump in right here on this one. Okay. So again, lots of interesting angles for us to follow up and to think about. And I'm guessing as well that probably each use case is a little different. Julie, you wanted to say something?
I think there's two interesting developments upcoming that I think are really fascinating for both organisations and academics to look at, and that is the evolution of different trust frameworks, which are both sectoral as well as, at the moment, some national and some international. And we're seeing those pop up in a whole range of different areas, which are spanning both the ethical review, the technical, the governance, the legal. So you're seeing these emerge now in the world of property, in pensions, in employment credentials, in health, in age. And also in various parts of the world, you're seeing different sandboxing. There's one popping up across the EU around age verification and parental consent. Health is another global one. And I think looking at how these constructs evolve, be it the trust frameworks and or sandboxing in different sectors, some of which are national and some of which are spanning different geographies, I think is a really interesting way forwards. And they do rely on that cross-functional working and on transparency. So I think those are areas to look at.
Yeah, really interesting, really interesting. We have a question in the chat. I apologize if I mangle your name, but Siddharth. It's a question around more theoretical issues around what trust is and necessary and sufficient conditions of trust and importance of trust. I wonder, would you like to ask your question in person, just so you can expand on that a little bit? I'm not seeing that. So okay. So I guess that well, first of all, does anyone in the panel want to have a crack at that one?
Could I have a quick share of thought? I mean, it's interesting. I was thinking about this when I was preparing for today, and did a bit of Googling around. Well, what do we mean by trust? Because it is a really interesting concept. And there's that kind of, one of the things I've just pulled out was that firm belief in the reliability, truth, or ability of someone or something. So persons or things, reliability, truth, and or ability. And we tend to focus on truth, I think, to a certain extent, but that reliability and ability element is really interesting as well. And that combination of dimensions. And to a certain extent, there's also that trade-off between trust and what's in it for me. Mm-hmm. So, the classic, I give all this information to Tesco for my club card in return for a few vouchers every now and then, and they'll know lots about me in terms of what I buy and shop and everything else. But actually, I'm willing to do that for £5 a month. So that degrees of trust and what you are happy to give away. And then you start to look at obviously things like Cambridge Analytica in that context, and what you're happy with Facebook and Google and others in this context. In return, that convenience in return for what? And at what point does that trade-off not work? And where are those boundaries for different things? So the general election in 2015 cost us about £115 million just to run from an administrative process. So last weekend's election, with inflation, pretty big election, 13 mayors, or was it 11? I can't remember off the top of my head. 100 million quid. Could we have done that better? Or would we want to do that better? Is that good? We get into all this. I think it's fascinating. And I think we're going to be having these sort of debates over the next few years. And they'll be right at the heart of the sort of national investment in digital capability that we make.
Brilliant. Thank you, Phil. Is it Satwa?
Yeah.
I want to get it right as well when people. But would you like to ask your question? And I think maybe Angela would like to come in and say a few words.
Yeah, no, it's basically because I am working in the area of trust, but I'm working in the area of philosophy of trust. So I was wondering if the team is willing to, or does research on these fronts as to you can go ahead with security, but security is not the only concern of trust. There are different other ways. So I was wondering if and also since I work in the political philosophy domain, so it also has implications for democracy and trust and the role of distrust. Judicious distrust is also very important in case of building trust. So I was wondering if the team does research or is willing to do research along these questions. These are more theoretical, and I can see that the team is more interested in doing practical things. But I was just, this was my question roughly.
Thank you very much. I think before I say goodbye to Alex, thank you very much, Alex, for everything. Angela, you want to come back into this, and then I might say a couple of words.
So it's to pick up as well on a couple of points that I think Phil added in. So I don't personally do research in this area, but I think it's a really interesting point you've made around philosophy of trust. And sort of drawing in a couple of the points Phil made. So it's how people might view trust. And if you think about health data, I can give you a couple of examples where people might have different perspectives on trust. So Phil gave a good example of all the data we regularly give away by clicking away to cookies all the time or whatever else on our phone, websites. So an example that I could give you from my area is, so I work a lot in the area of genomics, clinical genomics. So we're talking about people with incredibly rare genetic diseases. Now, cumulatively, they sort of have a huge health burden, essentially. And for many people, there is no cure, or there's no diagnosis, in fact. And if you talk to many of the patients with relation to those conditions that they have, and you talk to them about sharing data, and in fact some colleagues in the Centre for Health Informatics have done that piece of research around sharing of genomic health data, what you'll often find out is they will share it with anyone and everyone and anyone, actually, because there are so few people across the world that either maybe have the same sort of condition as they do, or people that know about that condition, that frankly any help that they can get, they will welcomely get. And I think we always think on the other side, which is we're very careful, in an academic sense, we're very cautious about how we share data, about doing things in the right way. But actually, sometimes I think we should be more driven by what the public, the patient and society is telling us about that, actually. I don't think it completely answers your question around, so certainly I'm not doing anything, but I think it's a really interesting point that you've made.
Thank you. And I mean, the answer is yes, we are definitely interested in the theoretical side as well. And I said we're interested in solving practical problems, but in my experience, you can't go around and solve practical problems without having that kind of theoretical underpinning. Otherwise, actually, all we are is consultants rather than academic researchers, and I think that's what we can bring to the party. The challenge is that actually different disciplines have very different perspectives on what trust means. So philosophers and psychologists and computer scientists will all mean something slightly different when they think about trust and trustworthiness. And I think there's a really interesting opportunity for us as a team, and we'd really welcome you in that team to think about, is there a sort of an underpinning model that each discipline can work to. Julie, did you want to say something around that as well?
Yes, I would. I know there has been good collaboration in the past already with Hilary Sutcliffe, but I would really enthuse that we could maybe try and build on some of the excellent work that she's done with Fraunhofer around trust in technology, such as the 7 trust drivers, and the link I've put in the chat. We found that work that she's done to be incredibly helpful and practical. Looking at trust as a spectrum of not an either judgment, looking at all the different angles of passionate, active, passive, resigned trust, and the same for distrust. And I think there's a body of work that we could actually build on, which I think is often half the battle, building on some of the things that Blue Peter-wise someone has already kicked off, and looking at how you can build on that.
That's great, thank you. Does that help to answer your question? Do you want to come back on that anymore?
No, thank you. Yeah, it does, and I'm currently looking at the TIC-Tech, which is the link that was shared. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Before we finish, there was a question in the chat, or a comment in the chat from Mira Moore about being an advanced computer science student and feeling like the 5th column that you talked about, Danny. And I wonder if this might be a good point just to say something about teaching and learning at the university in kind of trust and security generally, and what the prospects might be.
Well, I think one of the, I think you mentioned perhaps, or I think is a real breakthrough. We have our University College of Interdisciplinary Learning, which allows students to kind of sidestep their chosen focus. I mean, this is always the challenge, isn't it? In academia, sooner or later you have to focus on something. I always quote there was a film title, The Effect of Gamma Rays on Man in the Moon Marigolds. But the interdisciplinary learning allows students to take something and look at it from a different angle. So we've created this this digital trust and security module, which allows any undergrad on any course to take this 10 or 20 credits. And I'm very pleased to say that the only people who don't like this module are the computer scientists, because for them it's not technical enough, but it's really hit the mark in being broad enough. But those more in-depth teaching opportunities, which have been embedded, I think since 2004 now, showing my age, in computer science, have always tried to take that systemic view, and have already sort of got a long history of involving not only those external organisations, but having teaching opportunities taken up by students from the business school as well. So we've always been keen, and I think we succeed as well in achieving this right balance of rigour and relevance.
That's great, thank you, Danny. So I'm looking at the time, and I know we've not left ourselves enough time for what is a really interesting panel discussion. I feel like we've only just begun to scratch the surface. But before we finish, I'm just going to do a quick zip round everyone, if you don't mind, and maybe a couple of words on what are the big opportunities, what's the most exciting thing on the horizon that some of our researchers could start thinking about. Phil, can I put you on the spot first?
So we touched on quite a few already, actually, haven't we, in terms of identity and voting and indeed social media and so on. I think one of the really knotty problems we've got, and I saw some statistics today about the increase in ransomware and online fraud over even the last 12 months, and it is just, I mean, I know colleagues at GMP and others it's going through the roof, and it's not the deeply unsophisticated things of years gone by. you know, they're increasingly difficult to spot, and malware getting into all sorts of organizations and economically causing us some real problems. That is undoubtedly going to be something that is more and more of a problem. I think from a societal context, how we manage that balance. So I think the other really big one for me is just as a societally, how we digitize more, you know, effectively, take people with us, particularly those who are less comfortable being online, because the world is digitizing and not everyone is comfortable with that. So how do we support vulnerable older people, people with who struggle with accessibility issues that we get in the day-to-day, and how we design services that are effective and people have confidence in, that enable us to operate more effectively in joined up ways across the public sector, because most of the tricky problems we've got are things that require joined up solutions, and that is something we're not good at in the UK.
Great. I'm not sure anyone's that good at it. It's
No, true.
Huge challenge. Julie, what's on the horizon that we should be focusing on now?
I very much pick up on several of the strands that Phil mentioned. I think the transparency of fraud across organisations has always been something that's slightly hidden. If someone were to put a line item on your car insurance policy, oh, this 30 quid is because there's so much that, you know, we can't tell you about, but that isn't great, that's happening, that is fraudulent, or this in your taxes. And if that became something that was actually more spoken about rather than unspoken, that I think would be part of the journey. Looking at this element of how citizens can self-protect and organisations can self-protect is quite interesting, and it's one that we've been having strong discussions with CIFAS and across industry with, looking at bodies like the Economic Crime Commission. And that can be as simple as the early education around password protection, which needs to go further, and building on bodies of work such as UNICEF's AI Principles for Children, and explaining from a really early age how the world is changing in terms of AI. And I think on the axis of inclusion, we have to go across devices, documents, disabilities, diversity, and really look at this whole element of plain English, so that when people are reading things in the media, we're actually getting some, you know, clarity of reporting. Over the past year, I have wept at times looking at what people would read and pick up in the press versus what could be explained in the same number of inches. And we have to show that joining up across departments and areas here in the same way that we have to encourage that with transparency across government. Hopefully there might be some more lessons learned, but there's been many instances over the last year where we know, be it in public procurement or in efforts, things have not been joined up across public sector and government bodies, and we have a lot more to learn there, I think. So that transparency angle and the looking at citizen self-protection and how we help individuals to do that. I had the honour to take part in the Ada Lovelace Citizens Biometric Council Oversight Group this last year, and seeing how a group of 70 people from all backgrounds really developed their knowledge in the space of a year was extraordinary. So maybe something there we could also look at. Thank you.
That's really exciting. So we've had more joined upness from both of you. Julie, also more kind of power to the citizen in terms of information and understanding. Angela, where do you sit on this? What's the exciting thing on the horizon?
Yeah, so I think again, building on the themes that are coming through, I think if one of the ways certainly with patients and the public that we're going to manage to increase trust when we're talking about health data, when we're talking about using AI in the clinic, that kind of area, will be if we can give back control to patients and members of the public. So if they understand clearly what's happening to their data, but not just understanding what's happening to the data, but giving them the control of who's seeing it, where it's being used by, you know, we've got very sort of blanket policies now in place. So I think that would be a key area to be looking at. And the other area I think that's quite important, people will have seen quite a lot in the press, again, the general press around, there's been a lot around bias, around things like, you know, facial recognition software, but we're using that sort of approach, that sort of imaging software more and more in the clinic. And what we need to ensure is that, you know, those kind of inequities are sort of not there, and we've got much more diversity in the data sets that we're using. And again, if we can build trust in the kind of systems that we're beginning to look at to use in the clinic, then we'll start to sort of decrease the bias that's coming in there. So I think, yeah, much more to be done around those sorts of areas.
Great, thank you. And Danny, a very quick last word from you. What's the most exciting thing on your horizon?
I think recognizing that I think we need to leap over what we call the fourth industrial revolution of digitalization, and stop making this division between people and the technology. Recognize that we're developing systems, we're integrating people's so-called digital lives. We don't have separate digital lives. It's all one life. That digital persona which might continue after we've gone. I think as an individual, I'm not that bothered about it. So I think we really need to do more to actually take that systemic view, bring people together, and also just following on from what the others were saying. I think we've got to be careful. I think we have a duty of care, because there are plenty of people who will, they may have the wherewithal, but they might not even want to put in the kind of those effort for the protective measures. So I think as we bring more people online and we improve our levels of what we're labeling digital inclusion, we also have to be ready for sudden events which will digitally exclude them. We've talked in the past about having kind of cyber CPR, so when somebody is cut off, they're able to recover themselves and get on, because once they've invested all of that kind of Estonia-like activity online, what happens when the lights do go out, or you do get kind of, what's the saying, bricked by a piece of ransomware through no fault of your own, or just because you clicked on something because you were tired.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you so much. And I'm aware I've gone over time, and thank you for your patience, and thank you also to those of you still in the meeting for your patience. Phil, Julie and Danny, thank you so much. It's been so interesting. I wish we could have carried on a lot longer. So we're going to turn off the recording now for the meeting and kind of semi-close the meeting. Some of the cluster leads are available in breakout rooms if anyone would like to go and have a chat with them one-to-one. This is our attempt to try and recreate the milling around at the end of a meeting type of atmosphere. I'll be here in this room for a little while longer, and maybe some of our other panelists will be as well. So if you informally want to ask any questions, please do. Otherwise, thank you so much for coming along. Please do think about affiliating to the centre and stay in touch via our newsletter. Thanks, everybody.